Armored Core Lore, Kojima Particles. It is a new form of energy that advanced armored core technology from simple normals to giant war machines known as Next. It allowed the people of Earth to float in the skies above the poisoned world that their new leaders created. History. While the details of how Kojima Particles were found are not exact, from books such as Armored Core, A New Order for Next, and Armored Core Designs for and for Answer, what we do know is the discovery of this particle happened 7 years before the National Dismantle War, and was given the name of its founder, Kojima. It is noted on page 47 of the book Armored Core Designs for and for Answer that in the region of the South Pole the density of Kojima particles in the atmosphere is high, leading to primal armors being created as a part of a natural phenomenon. One can feel the presence of death around them. The fake glimpses of light are lightning resulting from primal armors being created in the opening of Armored Core 4, which leads to the next stage of this new particle's life as two corporations, Akavit and Raylinar, started to study and develop military technology to use this new particle. There was no plans to use this particle for everyday technology, and soon Omer Science would join in this studying and development of this new war tech, leading to a new war starting, an information war, where the corporations now try to find out what their rivals in the field knew about this new particle. This information warfare would soon lead to a huge development leap in technology, leading to Nexts, Kojima weapons, and primal armor. It's here we also learn from the previous mentioned book that buildings which deal with Kojima technology are round in shape as a result of controlling Kojima particles, a feature that is shared in both Armored Core 4 and Armored Core for Answer. The most famous example of such a place where it can be seen is the Kojima facility seen in both Armored Core 4 and for Answer, BFF's Sphere facility. Though it should be noted here that this facility would be used for power generation too, however there are no reports if this power was used for everyday use or simply kept to aid in the war effort of the corporations during the event of Armored Core 4, as we know later on it would be used to keep half of Earth's population alive in the clouds. But more on that later, as with leaps like this and other corporations now able to build their own Nexts, and have an understanding of the Kojima particles and the technology required to use it, the world began to struggle with its natural resources. Governments could not keep up with the demand of the ever-growing population, leading to some of these citizens going to the corporations for aid. However, what this would lead up to is the first use of Kojima-powered weapons, as 6 corporations rose up against their governments, and in turn the world itself. These corporations, namely Iqbal, Global Armaments, Bernard and Felix Foundation, Leo Mechanica, Ray Leonard and Rosenthal. With their new Kojima-powered machines of war, the governments of the world fell in less than a month, and these corporations installed their own rule. With this in place, the race on Kojima technology would resume, with all 6 major corporations looking to expand their knowledge on Kojima energy and what they could do with it. This would lead to a period where it seemed the corporations were at peace. This sadly was all a lie, as the information war between them was as strong as ever, as was the use of using underhanded tactics of arming anti-corporation groups and small attack forces which they could not be held accountable for. It would all lead to the start of the Lynx War, when GA, expecting their European branch, GAE, to leave and start working for Raylinar and Akavit, this led to the purge of their main base of operations, the Haida Arsenal. From here, this broke into next-on-next fighting, the death of thousands of conventional forces, and worst of all, mass Kojima contamination. During the research on these particles, the corporations found that a major drawback from these particles that allowed for world domination is that they seemed to be very radioactive, and once released, they could not be contained again. The Lynx War was what showed the real danger of these particles, as areas which Nexts, the main cause of this pollution, operated in, started to become inhabitable, as giant cities became highly radioactive deserts, such as the Old Clark area. This, however, did not stop the corporations, as fighting would go on. Kojima Pollution, however, was not a new concern, as it seemed one corporation, Raylinar, was already thinking ahead. However, this plan would not be known until years later, as the Close Plan. Before their defeat by the hands of GA's hired mercenary and later Lynx of White Glint, hero of Linarch, the corporation built several anti-air satellite cannons, which used Kojima energy, meant to take down other corporations' always moving satellites. However, it would not be into the late Lynx War when the famous League corporations, who supposedly were working together for humanity, found their real purpose. But this would come later, as even with this secret plan, the League corporations first had to deal with the poison Earth they had created, leading them to create floating homes for half of Earth's population, which would become known as cradles. These floating havens seemed to be the perfect solution, as they flew above the Kojima Pollution, allowing for clean and safe air for their work slaves, I mean citizens, and themselves. However, to power these cradles, they would have to use Kojima energy, resulting in the construction of arterias, large city-sized power facilities that contain Kojima generators and multiple large energy projection devices that broadcast power directly to the cradles. So now the very thing that had killed their panic was keeping them alive from its effects. As such, one can expect these facilities were meant to be heavily guarded and protected. However, it seems later this was all perhaps a stopgap measure, as finally after the League put down White Glimp and was just about to claim it had put down the threat to the cradles, suddenly all the Arterias became under attack from an organized and powerful group who had become known as Orca. Claiming they had come to purge the world of its sins and open a new path for humanity, this is where the famous secret plan is set in motion, the Close Plan. The idea of using the Kojima energy-powered anti-satellite cannons to blast a path through a corporation blockade of heavy space weapons known as assault cells and allow humanity a new path to a new life in space. What happens after is very much up for debate between historians. However, what is important here is this is where the Kojima tale would end until many years later, with the appearance of Jay in Armored Core Verdict Day, where his famous Nex-looking craft seems to use primal armor. However, it does not exactly act the same and seems to disable craft for a few seconds after use. Still, this really is the end of the history of Kojima, as after this, there is no more crafts that use this technology as we know of. But after all that, many may ask, what exactly are Kojima Particles? And to be honest, that is a hard question to answer, as looking over the properties of these particles with their high radioactive count and pollution, they do share a lot with nuclear particles used in nuclear weapons. There is also a line in the book Armored Core Designs for and for Answer that states, Kojima technology is also very closely linked to transporting Nex. I had a hard time putting the concept of Kojima technology being used on paper, and had to temporarily take a break. But then I happened to be designing the transport helicopters for the Next, with the director, when he stated the following, wouldn't they be transported in sealed containers to prevent Kojima pollution? From there I made other considerations for how I could incorporate transport and came to the idea of a sealed off space for the garage. The transport staff would most likely be wearing a suit meant for dealing with viruses, as opposed to normal workwear. A sealed off suit specifically for Kojima Particles most likely. However, this line alone does not define what a Kojima Particle is, as we cannot rule out the idea that Kojima Particles were not found, but created with a mixture of other variants, explaining perhaps how these particles can do so much, like creating be used as primal armor, or being focused into large lasers. There are of course others with much more knowledge than myself on the subject of particles, their creation, and what they can become and used for. To put it bluntly, this miracle particle could be man-made, a creation which is why it is very deadly and seems to lack any weaknesses. Still, for Lynx paying attention, you will have noted that before, as it is noted on page 47 of the book Armored Core Designs for and for Answer, that in the region of the South Pole, the density of Kojima particles in the atmosphere is high, leading to primal armors being created as part of a natural phenomenon. Now, this leaves a lot of questions. If these particles are not man-made, then they are formed naturally. Perhaps, then, the better example we have of what these particles are is in fact the famous ghost particles. High-energy neutrons that can travel unhindered for billions of light years from the most extreme environments in the cosmos to Earth. These ghost particles are recorded, as you guessed, in the South Pole. It's again just the closest link we have to what Kojima particles are, with the information presented. However, there are others with much more knowledge on the subjects, and I would always suggest personal research and keeping an open mind on the subject. For those wishing to know more, I will leave some research on both the ghost particles and another view on what Kojima particles are in the description. In the end, this is what we know about the Kojima particles for now. As always, the study of such subjects may never truly end, for with weapons, arms forts, and even homes powered by this particle, it is what gave humanity a huge boost in technology, but also turned out to be their downfall. Here ends the report on the Kojima particle. Armored Core Lore. The story of Armored Core 4 and for Answer.